Welcome to a new episode of Big Bun Game Club. I'm gonna talk about No More Heroes 2. It's been so long since I played that game, since it came out on the Wii, so I was very interested to see how it aged and how I would experience it this time around. I remember not liking 2 as much as 1, but I thought the gameplay was solid. I did not like the final boss though. So going into this, I was really curious to see if I was gonna love it more or hate it more. And for the most part, I think this is a very interesting game, and I would not say No More Heroes 2 is a soulless cash grab or anything. I think there was some effort put in to say something about the franchise and the characters and to advance them in the story, but there's a lot of stuff that hold it back that I didn't really pick up on when I first played it, because I think I was only focusing on the structure of the revenge plot, and also when No More Heroes 2 came out, it was so long since the first game that you really itch for more. So I was just kind of glad to play it this time around. Having just gotten off No More Heroes 1, I started to have a really different experience with 2 that really stood out to me. So let's just get right into the gameplay of No More Heroes 2 before we get to the story. The gameplay kind of celebrates what people loved in the first game. It's still that same mashy, simplistic combat. However, I feel that No More Heroes 1, despite it being simple, did have a nice touch to it that was kind of an elegance to it. Meaning that you can go through the game and always feel a drive to go to the gym, to either enhance your combos, to extend them, or to make yourself stronger, to get more vitality, to collect the hidden bingo balls or whatever Insane to destroy to get new abilities. While in 2, it kind of removes that, it keeps the gym, but the gym is very trivial. I never really felt the need to do it, because I was able to succeed in all of the boss fights, all of the areas. I never really felt pressured that I needed to get on that treadmill in No More Heroes 2 or to do any other exercise, because I never felt any pressure to do that. No More Heroes 1 had a good challenge that each level kind of tested you as you went on. Sure, the boss fights could be dumbed down as memorizing patterns and attacking when an enemy is vulnerable, but this one, I just felt that I was just wailing on bosses and I never really had to stop and think about what they're gonna do and kind of go around them. It was just, okay, lock on X and Y over and over. Since I was playing on the Switch, I was using the Pro Controller. So the combat just kind of felt monotonous after a while. And I think the one thing that people took for granted in the first game was that each level did try to mix up the combat a little bit. It wasn't too monotonous with it, but it wasn't too strict. But 2 was just too much of fighting enemies, go to the next room, fight more enemies, go to the next room, fight more enemies, go to the next room, fight more enemies, boss fight. And that just got more monotonous as you went on. And it started to feel like you're on a conveyor belt. In 1, each ranked mission felt like a reward. Like, oh, you grinded for all this money. You're rewarded with story advancement, this ranked venue, etc. Like, it felt like you did something that earned you some gratifying hack and slash ranked mission shit. In this game, it's just you just get these ranked missions back to back to back, and you never really get a time to savor the game. The game is just designed to kind of push you along, and I never really feel like that there was any time to slow down unless you choose to do it intentionally. In 1, it kind of forces you to slow down and to really explore the world, and I think that it's a bummer that they expanded 2's map a little bit by making it into a more of a city, but they don't let you explore it. It's all relegated to a menu. It's one thing that people complained about in the first game, that the open world was lacking, was bland. The performance was really bad on the Wii for open world, but it had so much character as it is. And then when you go to 2, it's like they took those criticisms And instead of improving the open world, it's just they take it to the other extreme where it's all menus and you just don't get time to savor the city and the improvements that they put into it. Sure, the credits show you the city around, but it would be better to just explore it yourself. I also found it very odd that in the first game, when you're in a store or in your motel room, that stuff is relegated to menus, but when you go out into Santa Destroy, it's open world exploration. You can drive around, do all kinds of shit. But then, in 2, the indoor stuff, like the stores you go to, the motel room, you can walk around freely, but then when you leave, you go into a map. And I kind of feel like maybe at some point they were going to have it be completely open world and either decided that no one liked it so they made it a menu or that they couldn't. And I kind of think that they should have just kept the same system they had in the first game with the open world, because I did not mind that the interiors were all relegated to menus, because that stuff is just kind of silly nonsense. So they did that to the open world. The ranked missions, you don't need to grind for money anymore. So grinding for money is completely trivial. Like, you don't really need to do them unless you want costumes or certain katanas. Honestly, I only bought one. The other, they give you another one for free, which is the rose, the thing on the cover, the dual katanas, which is really good. I love those weapons. And once you get them, you don't really ever need to upgrade your or to get any other katanas, I should say. But they do offer a cool, like, you can switch between katanas in gameplay, which is nice, but you never really need to. I've never been in a situation where I needed to switch katanas. The only thing I could think of is that maybe the batteries are different, so if you're out of battery on one and you need to get battery quickly, you can switch to another. But I've never found myself actively switching between the katanas. The other thing I noticed is that the recharging of the katanas takes so long and it's miserable in 2. Like, it kind of gets to the point where it just feels unfairly vulnerable. In 1, when you do the charge motion, it kind of feels like that you can do it quickly, but you really need to get distance from your enemies. And 2, it's like you can get distance from your enemies, but by the time you're just recharging, they can just close the distance. And when you're in a boss fight, it's even worse. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a stat I had to buff, or maybe you get better katanas that are better at recharging, but I found myself relying more on using the right stick to recharge the katanas instead of shaking it. While in 1, it felt more advantageous to just shake the controller instead of using the stick that you could. So that's the problem with 2. I just feel like that a lot of stuff feels a little bit more clumsy in its execution. The boss fights also feel meaningless. Like, I like their presentation. Some people argue that it's too grand for this game to have these ridiculous boss fights, but I didn't mind them that much. But my issue was that I never had to really respect the boss's moves. I could just kind of pin them in a corner and just have at them. Like, I kind of pretty much made them a dummy just to wail on. And I remember when I first played it on the Wii, it was a little bit more challenging to kind of fight them. And I don't know if it's the port that's the problem, or that they were just always this easy and I just struggled because I was a bad gamer back then. So I don't know how I feel about the combat in 2. It just feels a little more clumsy and rough around the edges. And it seems just more monotonous. And again, like, you don't really savor the game. The game's design with the ranked missions being back-to-back like this, it just kind of rushes you along. You can also fight. The one thing I did like about the way that this is done in 2 is that you can actually fight an assassin that's below you, because she's trying to get up in the ranks. And I do like that. I think that's a cool idea to have someone that's behind you trying to catch up to you, for once that happens. So I do like that idea. But that boss fight's also kind of weak. They tried to do something with it, but it's just, again, she just became a dummy for my beam katana, pretty much. The music is really good. I loved the music in 2. That was actually a good advancement of what the first game did. It's just a shame that I could not really appreciate the music in the second boss fight. That one was such a noisy, obnoxious fight. Everything was making noises, everything was going on, and it was just very hard to enjoy that fight alone. It's the DJ boss, and he's just so obnoxious, and I hated it. It was just like I just want to fight a boss. Like none of the other boss fights I've seen ever has been this annoying. Like it kind of feels like how other people can view video games as just noisemakers almost, and I just hated it. It was just awful. But I did like the music of that stage. It was the theme of No More Heroes, but it had lyrics to it, which I really liked. The other boss fight I did like was the very first boss fight the game opens on. That one I liked because it was a callback to the first game where it kind of gives you the boss fight that you never get. In the first game, they just relied on the trailer as story exposition, pretty much. They showed that trailer that they showed back in 2006, I think, or whatever. They showed that trailer, and that's like part of the story, actually. So I do like in one that you never really see this fight. You never really see the fight in the game. They allude to it. They show bits of it, but you never fight that guy. In 2, they directly just give you that fight a little bit differently, sure, but it's the same fight in spirit. So that's a cool callback, and I think that kind of sets the tone of what the game is. No More Heroes 2 feels more of a game that is more invested in giving you stuff that you either wanted in the first game or more of. And it doesn't, and that's nice on a fan level, but at the same time, it kind of muddles the game, as we'll get into momentarily. But as I said, the boss fights are kind of lame. The character designs are nice. The only one that feels odd to me is Travis. He just looks really off-model to me. I don't know why. It's not really the hair. The hair is different, but he's older, so that's fine. It's just there's something about his face that just looks very, very different from the first game. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I'm alone on this, but it just felt off to me. The graphic style is nice. It still kind of retains that iconic cell shading that they used in the first game. However, I think it lacks some of the style that the first one had. The first one had this cool style with the shadows that was like really dark and contrasting to the form. So it kind of had this comic book feel to it. This time around, it feels a lot less like that. It feels just more like a typical cell-shaded game. It still has that graininess to it that the first one did, but it just doesn't have the same punch as the first game did. It's not bad, but it's just kind of like, it doesn't have a lot of style. And as much as people groaned and disliked Travis Strikes Again did have some style that I really loved with what they shown. The opening cutscene when Badman's driving to Travis's trailer, that had a very nice style to it. It was very it was very stylized and very beautiful. But No More Heroes 2 just feels kind of like, yeah, it's cel shaded. Okay, here you go. Like, I don't know why. It's like they really wanted to show that the Wii could do good graphics in that style, but I think the style of 1 really showed a lot of personality to it. But I wouldn't say it ruined the game. I do like that it added a little bit more motion with the jacket you wear, the hair like kind of flails around. I do like the details in that, but I just like the style in 1 a little bit more. So I think that's pretty much all I want to say in regards to the gameplay, graphics, and music. The music is just beautiful. I love the Margaret's boss theme. I think it's the soundtrack I have. They labeled it as Hagio Take 2. I don't know if that's the actual name, but that's what I have in my soundtrack. But it's a good soundtrack. It's a good track. I really loved it. Um, and I love the supermarket theme as well. Oh my god, so many tracks in this game are just so good. It's just, oh, I loved it. But the story. Now let's get into the story. So there will be spoilers, but it's an old game. I'm But if you're playing it now, come back, I guess. Anyways, let's get into the story. I do like how the game opens. The opening cutscene is very, like, it sets the tune of what this game is, kind of. Like, it kind of goes into what happened after the first game and where the UAA kind of went. Now, of course, people criticize this twist as the UAA never existed, so why would they exist now? How would they exist now? And I kind of feel like that the idea was, after what happened with Travis, it kind of became a monster. This UAA became such a strong myth amongst other assassins, is that it started to take a form of its own. So I do think that it wasn't that bad, but I just think that there was something that they just did not throw in, that they could have tied it in a little bit better. It just kind of is, it's either insinuated or they just kind of forgot about it. I think they tried to address it in Travis Strikes Again, kind of, but I do think that this game should have explained a little bit better as to how the UAA now is an actual thing. It's a little bit more gratuitous with that. It's a little more like fan service in that regard. But I do like the idea that assassins have become a commodity. It's become like a televised thing. People are excited to see these assassins killing each other, this and that. And I thought this was going to be what the story is going to be tackling. And to a point, it's kind of, I feel it was kind of criticizing stories at that time. A lot of movies, video games, TV shows, what have you, have delved into this topic of these heinous things being such a profitable commodity. Around this time, MGS4 came out, which talked about the war economy and all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking, this is going to be delving into that, and it's going to be criticizing it or something. But then it just kind of drops it in favor of a generic revenge plot that I think that they tried to make it a goofy little twist that felt like a pseudoism, in the sense that the main villain is Pizza Bat Jr., and that's a callback to one of the side missions you can do in No More Heroes 1, where you're killing a Pizza Bat CEO. But it's so minimal in the first game that, it's the main entity of the second game. And I could see the idea of, like, we're gonna do this, and it's gonna be so, like, minor that you're not going to think about until you play the first game again. I do like the idea that something so mundane created a story for 2. It's just that the main villain is so shitty. It's such a piece of shit villain. I mean, again, I like the idea, but it fails on a design level, with Pizza Bat being such a piece of shit character. You don't really care for him. And there's no real drive. It just seemed that they skipped some steps in between. And then when you face off with Pizza Bat, it just kind of seems weak. Like, you feel more invested with the gang that goes to Bishop to kill him than with Pizza Bat. Like, there's no connection or strong connection in the story, because the gang is relegated to side missions that you don't really need to care about. The only reward you get for it is to not wear a jacket. Like, and as far as I understand, it was kind of a regret within Grasshopper to design those gang members to be in side missions that mean nothing. So I agree so it seems that this was like a little misstep within the development. And some of the bosses just seem very, very weak. In the first game, as we talked about in the last video about No More Heroes, that each one had had a strong theme associated with them that kind of furthered the story and development of Travis. This one, it seems so sporadic with what bosses get development, what bosses bond with Travis, what happens, because some of them just feel like they're just being thrown at you without any care. Like some cutscenes just pretty much start with, I'm the assassin of right now. Okay, Travis, what's up? We're gonna fight. Yeah, we're gonna fight. Okay. Then they fight. Then you kill them. Oh, you beat me. Yeah, I did. And then he just slices them up. And that's kind of how some of them kind of feel, and a lot of them just feel shallow in that. One being the football player. That one just seemed very, very empty. There's no real theme going on except visually. Visually, sure, it's like, well, Assassins has gone so big it's like a sport. So this guy is a football player and he's like celebrating the attention, but that's kind of all it goes to. It doesn't go anywhere else. Like each character in the first game had this very like it kind of made it a little bit more layered than this game. It's not super deep in the first one, but it's a little bit more substantial than what they did in 2. The few bosses that I really loved were Margaret. I liked her design. I liked what she was trying to get across. I do like that they tie her backstory to the song that you listen to as you're fighting her. And before you kill her, she says, "Oh, remember the song? Did you pay attention to the song or something?" And he said, "I remembered it," or something before he killed her. So I do like that. But the beginning of it is such a quick back and forth that it just kind of feels like that they kind of forgot about what her story was. So they put in the song and they added a cutscene saying, "Listen to the song," pretty much. So it's a little bit underutilized with her. The other one I liked was the second rank boss, where the boss character is kind of talking to Travis how he's the crownless king. And she's jealous that he was able to escape it, and she wants to know how he did it. And she's trying to like find meaning in what's going on with the assassins. She's done so much shit that she doesn't see herself as a person. She sees herself as an assassin. I do like the ramifications of that, and Travis coming to terms to that. That kind of stuff was nice, where you actually see some development, and it was fitting for that fight to be right before the first rank boss, but it just falls short when the final boss is such a piece of shit, and it just kind of falls flat because Travis is just angry at him. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you," and this and that, and it just kind of defeats all of the nuance and themes that fight right before it was giving the player. So I do think it's a little disappointing that it stuck with this revenge plot. I think they had something much better if they just focused on the idea that the UAA has gotten so big and bloated that the meaning of being an assassin has been dragged through the mud and means almost nothing now. And I think that would have been a much better story than, oh, Travis is seeking revenge. Like, I just think they had something going, and maybe they just couldn't figure out how to end it, so they just defaulted to a revenge plot. That's kind of the vibe I was getting. Everything about that revenge story feels very, very last minute, and it almost feels like that the second ringed boss fight actually was going to be the final boss. It just is very bizarre with some of this stuff, how everything leads into each other. Then the final boss kind of feels tonally out of place. You have another boss fight, I think it was the rank 3 boss fight, you fight against a Soviet astronaut. And that one is another nice boss fight. You get this nice scene where this character comes from space and he doesn't know where he is. He's talking to command. He's like, "I need backup. I need this. I need that." Whatever. He seems very confused. And then when you beat him, he tells him that, "Welcome home. You're on Earth." And he's like, "I'm on Earth? Oh, it's just as beautiful as it." And it was like him, finally resting in peace. So it's just kind of sad that they had all these nice story segments by the end, and Pizza Bat just kind of shoots that right in the foot. And when I started playing this game, the one thing I kind of like groaned at was right after that that narration of Paul eating, you get interrupted by Travis saying, before we get going, you bloodthirsty fans, whatever, we gotta take a nice save." And at that point, I was just like, okay. And then after that, it breaks the fourth wall right again after you beat, is it Selter Helter? It's a play on the name of the first of the boss of the character in the first game. So after you beat him, then you have this exchange with Sylvia, and then like Travis is like, we're not gonna stop asking you until we know what happened to you in these past few years. And he looks at the camera. Then Sylvia's like, well, some people didn't play No More Heroes 1. Looks at the camera. And I'm just like, we're already getting fourth wall jokes already. And the thing is that Suda51 has always done that in his games, but it usually happens at the right time. Like, a lot of these jokes worked so well in No More Heroes 1, for example, because it was built up. The game got you immersed in in the exchange and wanting to know what's going on. Like when in the first game when you're fighting Jean, like that whole cutscene before the fight, you're immersed as to what happened. Like, oh my god, who is this woman? And you're invested in what's going on. And then they break the fourth wall with Travis fast forwarding the monologue, them mentioning Duke Nukem Forever, etc. And in this, they just kind of throw it around without any development. So it when I first played the game back in like 2010 or whenever this game came out, I was like, well, that's funny. And now it's like, yeah, okay, like this stuff didn't ruin Travis as a character for me, and it didn't ruin the game like necessarily, but it did kind of sour the experience a little bit. It kind of felt a little bit more like someone was sitting there thinking, this is what the fans want. They love the fourth wall jokes in the first game. Oh, they like the goofy nonsense in the first game. Let's put that in. And they didn't understand kind of what made them work almost. And that's to be expected because No More Heroes 2 is not directed by Suda51. He was involved, but he was if I'm not mistaken, he was a executive director. And at that point, Suda51 was also busy doing other games. So I wouldn't necessarily blame Suda51 completely for this. But I wouldn't also say that this game is terrible because of it, or that it ruins the game, or ruins the characters, or anything like that. Another person I would see bring up that, they made Travis a cool guy character, which he isn't. He's this otaku, nerdy loser. And I agree that he's not a cool character, but I do think that it's fitting in the sense that he just, got rank 1 in the first game, and everyone in Saint to Destroy is kind of like reveling in his legend, and people are viewing him differently. So I can kind of understand that that might go to his head as a fighter. Like, he might see himself as like, oh, I'm done, I don't want to be rank 1 anymore. But that can also be done out of arrogance or narcissism. Like, I'm above I did what I needed to do, I'm just gonna leave. And then he just lets that kind of feed into his ego. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's out of character or silly for this to happen. You can disagree with how cool he acts. I do think it's more of an issue with Shinobu as a character, Shinobu and Sylvia and all these other girl characters that just want to fuck him. And that is a little like, this isn't what No More Heroes is about almost. But I do also get that he is a legend by this time in the timeline. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's impossible for No More Heroes 2 to have Travis be in such a big status, because I think it makes sense for him to be there. I think it's just that it's a missed opportunity to kind of criticize that and to kind of deconstruct that angle of it. Like, I think that it could have worked to go into that, but they focused more on the revenge story, that it just never gets that screen time to really delve into what it means for him to be this elevated assassin that everyone wants to be and everyone wants to like fuck him, and he's like this legend. And they kind of address that in Travis Strikes Again, and that's kind of why I respect Travis Strikes Again a lot, and why I adore that game. Is that any other game can just say this sequel was bad, so we're just gonna say this never happened, or we're just gonna dismiss it. Travis Strikes Again actively incorporates that into the story and kind of, shows that he rode that high in No More Heroes 2, and then by the end, he just wanted to get away from it completely. So I think it's nice that Travis Strikes Again addresses the story of 2 as much as it did. Because I think, again, 2 had a lot of good ideas. It's just that it never got the attention it deserved into the story. It focused on this lame revenge plot that really does feel like it was a last minute addition to the story that they just couldn't satisfy. They couldn't get a satisfying ending to it, so they just went with this revenge plot instead. So that's kind of how it felt for me story wise. The dialogue was weak for the most part, but I did like some of it near the end of the game in regards to the last few boss fights. I did like some of the story development with Sylvia and Travis. The confessional scenes that they disperse out in each part of the game is nice. It's just that the twist of what these two characters are is a little too obvious. But that is kind of the point. But I do like that it kind of breaks up the monotony a little bit and kind of gives you some time to understand the characters. It's just a shame that it never feels too meaningful. The last scene with it is pretty good. Like, it kind of has a nice solid ending to it that does lead into Travis Strikes Again pretty well. But again, this was not directed by Suda51, so I could see that maybe he would have done something a little bit differently with this story. But again, I think it had some good ideas. It never really realized them as much as it could have been. But do I think this game is bad? Do I think this game is a piece of shit? Not really. I think it's actually it's a solid game. I just don't think it's as good as the first. I think it's worth at least playing to really appreciate the franchise. I think if you play 2, then go to Travis Strikes Again, that might get you some new ways to experience the story and to really appreciate what's going on. So I wouldn't necessarily say that 2 was bad or not worth playing, but I do think it's a little bit weaker than 1 still. My initial opinion when I revisited it was very negative. I thought it was a really mediocre sequel, but by the end, I started really seeing stuff that I kind of appreciated going on, that I wouldn't say I regret playing it or revisiting it. I think it's worth playing and checking out, but I do think that 1 is the better experience for that game, but 2 is not that bad. I think a lot of people kind of give it a really bad rap for a lot of stuff, but I do think that there is something to appreciate that they try to do with it, and it kind of fails, but it's just, I do sense that there was some effort and passion put into it. So I wouldn't agree with the notion that this is a cash grab or a soulless sequel. I do think there was some effort and love put into it. It never really grew to be what it could have been. It's really like they planted the seeds, they try to grow this crop up, they try to make a beautiful tree, and it just falls a little short of what it could have been. If you were to ask me to rate it, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. It's very monotonous with its design. I just think the biggest gripe I have with the gameplay is just that everything can go by so quickly that you can get through the game. Like, the game just feels like it's a conveyor belt almost. That's really my only complaint. Like I just got off of 1 and I started to appreciate the grinding nature of it way more. And this game just kind of removes that, and it just, kind of feels a little bit more empty and just kind of like, yeah, here, go. And it just kind of feels like there's no rest. It just kind of puts you on a fast track to the end. And I remember a lot of marketing was saying that when this came out on the Wii, oh, this game's got 50 bosses. And then when you actually play it, it's like 13. It's like a very minuscule number, so you never really fight 50 bosses. They kind of lied when this game was in development, which is weird because I don't know if it's necessarily that they were honestly trying for 50 bosses or that they intentionally said they were 50 when there wasn't. But it is what it is. I do like the idea that this game also adds other playable characters like Shinobu and Henry, but Shinobu feels a lot more clunky that I hope that they iron out in 3 if you do play as her. She just kind of feels like a very sloppy character in some cases. And Henry feels okay, but these characters could be ironed out a little bit more, and if they do return as playable characters in 3, hopefully. But I think Travis is probably the better character to play as, honestly. But that is it for this episode of Big Button Game Club. Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are. Did you like this game too? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And again, thank you guys for watching and supporting me, be it however you decide to support me. It's really nice to see people enjoy these videos and like watching them. I like doing these videos for you guys, and I hope to see you guys again in the next stream or video. See you when I see ya. Bye-bye.